The small Northern California town of Pine Valley embraced the early autumn morning like a tender secret. Morning fog rolled in from the coastal mountains, wrapping the Victorian-style buildings in a gentle haze. Inside Moonlight Brew, the town's beloved artisanal bakery and cafe, Silas Whitmore methodically arranged porcelain cups by color, white fading into cream, then soft blue, creating a rainbow of ceramics that pleased his meticulous nature. At 36, Silas had mastered the art of appearing completely put together. His tall, athletic frame moved with practiced grace behind the counter, his blue-gray eyes focused on each task with careful precision. The morning light filtering through the cafe's windows caught the slight silver threading at his temples, making him look distinguished rather than older. His neatly pressed linen shirt and dark jeans spoke of someone who valued order, while his barista apron, decorated with small coffee stains that refused to wash out, hinted at the passionate craftsman beneath the controlled exterior. Perfect alignment, he whispered to himself, adjusting the last cup exactly 1 centimeter to the left. The familiar whistle escaped his lips, an old habit his mother had loved, as he began his morning bread-making ritual. The sound of rain starting to fall outside created a soothing backdrop to his methodical movements. The bell above the door chimed softly, but Silas didn't look up immediately. His hands were deep in dough, and he had learned long ago that most early morning customers appreciated the quiet as much as he did. But then a gentle voice broke through the rain's patter. "Excuse me? Would you happen to have chamomile tea?" Something in that voice, its warmth perhaps, or its slight uncertainty, made Silas pause. He looked up, and for the first time in years, his carefully maintained composure slipped. Standing at his counter was a young woman who seemed to have brought spring into his autumn morning. Her dark brown hair fell in soft waves around her face, slightly damp from the rain, and her hazel eyes peered at him through elegant gold-rimmed glasses that had started to fog up from the temperature difference between outside and in. She wore a flowing floral dress under a light cardigan, and rain droplets clung to the fabric like morning dew. Her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her messenger bag, which was decorated with small embroidered flowers. Everything about her seemed to whisper rather than shout, and Silas found himself inexplicably drawn to that quietness. "Of course," he managed, quickly wiping his hands on his apron. "I have several varieties, actually. Do you prefer pure chamomile or a blend?" The woman approached the counter, and Silas noticed how she took in every detail of his cafe. The arranged cups, the fresh pastries, the herbs growing in small pots along the windowsills. Her eyes lit up at the sight of the plants. "Pure chamomile, please," she replied, then added with a small smile, "I'm Isabelle Hart. I just moved here with my brother." "Silas Whitmore," he responded, his usual reserved smile warming slightly. "Welcome to Pine Valley." He turned to prepare her tea, his movements precise but somehow softer than usual. "Are you settling in all right?" Isabelle's fingers traced the edge of the counter, and Silas noticed they were stained slightly green, like someone who spent time working with plants. "We're getting there. My brother Nate loves it already. He says the air here smells like adventures waiting to happen." Something in her voice when she mentioned her brother caught Silas's attention, a mixture of love and protective concern he recognized all too well. He selected his finest chamomile flowers, carefully measuring them into a glass teapot that would allow Isabelle to watch the blooming process. "Your brother sounds like a poet," Silas commented, placing the teapot and a timer on the counter between them. "These flowers need exactly 3 minutes to release their full flavor." He hesitated, then added, "Would you like to watch them bloom?" Isabelle leaned forward, her glasses sliding slightly down her nose. The morning light caught her face just so, and Silas found himself noticing the small scatter of freckles across her nose, the way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners as she smiled. "They're dancing," she whispered, watching the flowers swirl in the hot water. Her observation made Silas look at something he'd seen hundreds of times before in a completely new way. The flowers did seem to dance, twirling in an elegant underwater ballet he'd somehow never noticed. The timer chimed softly, and Silas poured the golden liquid into one of his blue cups. The color reminded him of a summer sky. As he handed it to her, their fingers brushed briefly, and he felt an unexpected jolt of warmth. "Thank you," Isabelle said, cradling the cup in both hands. She took a small sip and closed her eyes, savoring the flavor. "It's perfect." Before Silas could respond, the door chimed again and a young man bounded in, bringing with him the smell of rain and unbridled enthusiasm. He was shorter than Isabelle, with curly hair and warm brown skin that glowed despite the gray morning. His eyes held the same shade of hazel as Isabelle's, but sparkled with an innocent joy that made him seem younger than his 18 years. "Bells! I found the perfect leaf," Nate exclaimed, rushing to his sister's side. He carefully pulled a maple leaf from his pocket, its colors a stunning gradient from green to gold to red. "Look, it's like nature's painting." Isabelle's entire face softened as she examined the leaf. "It's beautiful, Nate. Maybe we can press it when we get home?" Silas watched their interaction, something tight in his chest loosening at the pure affection between the siblings. It reminded him of moments with his own mother, memories he usually kept carefully locked away. Nate noticed Silas then, his smile growing even brighter. "Oh, hello. Are you the bread wizard? The whole street smells like heaven." The unexpected title startled a genuine laugh from Silas. "Bread wizard? That's a new one. Would you like to see how the magic happens?" Nate's eyes widened with delight, but he looked to Isabelle first, a small gesture that spoke volumes about their relationship. She nodded, and Nate practically bounced to the counter. Silas found himself opening up his sacred space behind the counter, showing Nate how to shape a small roll while explaining the science behind the perfect crust. The young man's questions were surprisingly insightful, and his joy at successfully creating his first bread roll was contagious. "Bells, look! I made bread!" Nate held up his slightly lopsided but perfectly golden roll with pride. Isabelle had been watching them with a soft expression, her tea forgotten in her hands. "It's wonderful, Nate." She glanced at Silas, something unreadable in her eyes. "Thank you for being so kind to him." "It's not kindness when it's genuine interest," Silas replied quietly, surprising himself with his honesty. "Your brother has good instincts for baking." The morning light had strengthened, burning away the fog outside. Isabelle glanced at her watch and gently touched Nate's shoulder. "We should go, little brother. We have to finish unpacking." Nate nodded, carefully wrapping his bread roll in a napkin. "Can we come back tomorrow, please?" Isabelle hesitated, looking at Silas. For the first time in years, he found himself hoping someone would say yes. "You're always welcome," he said, his usual reserve softening. "I open at 6 every morning except Mondays." "Then we'll see you tomorrow," Isabelle replied, her smile shy but genuine. "Thank you for the perfect cup of tea, Silas." As they left, the bell chiming their departure, Silas found himself standing still behind his counter, the morning sun warming his face. His perfectly arranged cups suddenly seemed too rigid, too controlled. Without thinking, he reached out and turned one slightly out of alignment. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of customers and coffee orders, but Silas kept finding himself looking at the door, remembering the way Isabelle had watched the chamomile flowers dance, how Nate's joy had filled the entire cafe, how for the first time in years his carefully constructed routine felt not like a shield, but like something that could be shared. That evening, as he cleaned the last dishes and prepared to close, Silas noticed something on the counter where Isabelle had sat. It was a small pressed flower, a forget-me-not, placed carefully between two napkins. Next to it was a childish but charming drawing of what appeared to be himself in a wizard's hat, surrounded by floating loaves of bread, signed with a crooked, "From Nate." Silas picked up both items with unexpectedly trembling fingers. His mother had loved forget-me-nots. She had planted them all around their house, saying they were reminders that love stayed even when people couldn't. He had avoided the flowers since her passing, but somehow finding this one didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like a beginning. He carefully placed both treasures in his office drawer, next to his mother's old recipe book. Then, breaking his evening routine for the first time in years, he went to the window herbs and began planning where he might add more flowers. Perhaps, he thought, it was time for his carefully controlled world to bloom into something new. A dawn painted Pine Valley in shades of lavender and gold as Isabelle stood before her bathroom mirror, adjusting her gold-rimmed glasses for the third time. She couldn't explain why she felt nervous about returning to Moonlight Brew. It was just a cafe, after all. Just a kind baker with storm-colored eyes who had shown such gentle patience with Nate. "Bells, are the pancakes ready?" Nate's voice echoed through their small rental house, still half filled with moving boxes. "I want to show Mr. Wizard my leaf collection before he gets busy." Isabelle smiled, her fingers unconsciously touching the small flower-shaped clips in her hair. "Coming, Nate. And remember, his name is Silas." "But Mr. Wizard suits him better," Nate insisted, as Isabelle entered their kitchen. He sat at their small table, already dressed in his favorite green sweater, carefully arranging pressed leaves in a worn leather notebook. Look, I organized them by color, just like his cups. Isabelle's heart swelled with pride as she observed her brother's careful work. Each leaf was meticulously placed with small notes in Nate's improving handwriting describing where he'd found them. At 18, Nate saw the world through a lens of pure wonder that made everything, even fallen leaves, seem magical. That's beautiful work, she said, serving him heart-shaped pancakes drizzled with maple syrup. Maybe you could show Silas how you press them? I noticed he has quite a collection of herbs in his cafe. Nate's face lit up. Do you think he'd want to learn? I could teach him. I'm really good at it now. I'm sure he'd appreciate your expertise, Isabelle replied, watching as Nate savored his breakfast. She touched the small forget-me-not pendant at her neck, a gift from their parents on her 16th birthday. Sometimes she wondered if they'd be proud of how she'd managed since their passing. If taking care of Nate alone at 27 was enough. The walk to Moonlight Brew took them past pine trees still heavy with morning dew. Nate skipped ahead, stopping occasionally to examine interesting leaves or chat with early morning dog walkers. Isabelle found herself appreciating how quickly the small town had embraced them, how neighbors already greeted Nate by name. The cafe's windows glowed warmly in the early light. Through the glass, Isabelle could see Silas moving with practiced grace, his tall frame bent over what appeared to be fresh pastries. She hesitated at the door, suddenly unsure. Come on, Bells. Nate tugged at her hand. The bread wizard is waiting. Before she could respond, the door opened from inside. Silas stood there, looking slightly embarrassed. I saw you through the window, he explained, his usual composure slightly ruffled. I thought, well, I made fresh cranberry scones. They pair well with chamomile. Isabelle felt warmth spread across her cheeks. You remembered my tea preference? I remember all my customers' preferences. Silas replied automatically, then added more softly, but yes, I remembered yours specifically. Nate bounced past them both, already making his way to the counter. Mr. Wizard, I brought my leaf collection to show you, and Bells says I can teach you how to press leaves properly if you want to learn. Silas's controlled expression softened into a genuine smile. I'd be honored to learn from an expert. He glanced at Isabelle. If that's all right with your sister. Of course, she managed, following them inside. The cafe smelled of fresh bread and something else. Lavender, maybe. She noticed new flowers in the windowsill herbs, their purple blooms adding color to the morning light. I planted them yesterday evening, Silas said, noticing her gaze. I thought, well, the herbs seemed lonely. Something about his admission, so simple yet revealing, made Isabelle's heart flutter. She watched as he prepared her tea with the same careful attention as before, each movement precise yet somehow more relaxed than yesterday. Tell me about your work, Silas said, as he placed the glass teapot between them. Nate mentioned you're a botanist. Yes, Isabelle started but was interrupted by an older woman bursting through the door. Silas, thank goodness you're open. I need your help, dear. The woman, elegantly dressed despite the early hour, approached the counter with determination. The hospital fundraiser is tonight, and our caterer just canceled. Please tell me you can help? Isabelle watched as Silas's shoulders tensed slightly, his careful mask slipping back into place. Mrs. Bradford, good morning. How many people are we talking about? 200, Mrs. Bradford said, wringing her hands. I know it's last minute, but you're the only one who could possibly help. Your mother always said yes to these things, God rest her soul. The mention of his mother made Silas's jaw tighten imperceptibly. Isabelle found herself stepping forward before she could think better of it. I could help, she offered, surprising herself as much as Silas. I have experience with event planning, and if Silas is willing to do the baking, I could assist with setup and coordination. Silas looked at her with an unreadable expression. You don't have to. I want to, Isabelle interrupted gently. Besides, Nate loves helping at events, don't you? Nate looked up from his leaf collection with enthusiasm. Can I make name cards? I can draw flowers on them. Mrs. Bradford's face brightened. Oh, that would be lovely. And you are? Isabelle Hart, she introduced herself. My brother Nate and I just moved here. We'd be happy to help, wouldn't we, Nate? Yes, Nate exclaimed. I can show everyone my leaf collection, too. Mrs. Bradford looked between them all with growing relief. Silas, dear? What do you say? Silas was still looking at Isabelle, something shifting in his storm-colored eyes. Finally, he nodded. Yes, we can help, but Mrs. Bradford, I'll need to close the cafe early to prepare. Of course, of course. Thank you all so much. Mrs. Bradford hugged each of them in turn, making Silas stiffen slightly. I'll send over all the details right away. After she left, silence fell in the cafe. Isabelle worried she had overstepped, but then Silas spoke softly. "You didn't have to offer." "I know," she replied, meeting his gaze. "But sometimes it's easier to face overwhelming things with help." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. "My mother," he said slowly, "used to say something similar." "Tell me about her?" Isabelle asked gently, watching as he began gathering ingredients with mechanical precision. Silas's hand stilled on a bag of flour. "She was everything about this place. She taught me to bake, to notice details, to care about doing things right." His voice caught slightly. "She passed 3 years ago. I never told her." He trailed off, but Isabelle understood. Loss had its own language after all. "I think," she said carefully, "mothers know things, even when we don't say them." Silas looked at her then, really looked at her, and Isabelle felt seen in a way that both terrified and thrilled her. "Your parents?" he asked softly. "Car accident 4 years ago," she replied, her hand automatically reaching for her forget-me-not pendant. "Nate and I, we learned to be enough for each other." "You are?" Nate said suddenly, making them both start. He had been so quiet they'd almost forgotten he was there. "You're more than enough, Bells. And now we have Mr. Wizard too." The simple honesty in his statement made both adults blink rapidly. Silas cleared his throat. "We should start planning for tonight. 200 people. We'll manage," Isabelle assured him, pulling out her phone to make notes. "Nate, why don't you start designing those name cards? Maybe with different leaves for different tables?" As Nate settled in with paper and colored pencils, Isabelle and Silas began planning. She noticed how he relaxed slightly as they created lists and timelines, how structure seemed to calm his anxiety. She found herself sharing her own organizational tricks, learned from years of juggling Nate's care with her career. Throughout the morning, customers came and went, but something had shifted in the cafe's atmosphere. Silas moved more freely, his whistle returning as he baked. Isabelle found herself settling into a rhythm with him, anticipating when he needed space or help. Nate's cheerful presence drew smiles from everyone who entered, his enthusiasm for his leaf-decorated name cards infectious. By noon, they had a solid plan. Silas would bake through the afternoon, breads, pastries, and his signature cranberry scones. Isabelle would handle setup and coordination, while Nate's nature-themed name cards would guide guests to their tables. As they worked, Isabelle found herself stealing glances at Silas. She noticed how his shoulders relaxed when he thought no one was watching, how his eyes crinkled slightly when Nate made him laugh, how his careful precision hid a deep well of creativity. She wondered if anyone else saw these details, if anyone else had been allowed close enough to notice. "Bells," Nate called out, interrupting her thoughts. "Look what Mr. Wizard taught me." She turned to find her brother carefully braiding bread dough, his face concentrated but happy. Silas stood beside him, his hands gentle as he guided Nate's movements. "You're a natural," Silas told Nate, and the pride in his voice made Isabelle's heart skip. "Want to learn how to make it shine with egg wash?" As she watched them work together, Isabelle felt something shift inside her. Here was someone who saw Nate, really saw him, not as a responsibility or a challenge, but as a person worth teaching, worth knowing. She thought of all the times people had pulled away when they learned about Nate's special needs, how many potential relationships had faded before they began. But Silas seemed to bloom in Nate's presence, his careful control giving way to genuine warmth. Maybe, Isabelle thought, watching them laughing over flower-covered hands. Sometimes the biggest acts of trust weren't in grand gestures, but in small moments of letting someone in. The morning light had shifted to afternoon gold, and they still had much to prepare for the evening ahead. But something had been planted in those morning hours, something as delicate as a forget-me-not, as sturdy as a well-kneaded bread, something that, like all growing things, would need time, care, and trust to fully bloom. The Pine Valley Community Center buzzed with pre-event energy as Isabelle adjusted the last centerpiece. She'd woven local wildflowers among Nate's pressed leaves, creating arrangements that captured the town's natural beauty. The evening light streamed through tall windows, casting golden shadows across tables adorned with her brother's carefully crafted name cards, each featuring unique leaf designs and delicate calligraphy. "These are beautiful," Silas's voice came from behind her, making her heart skip. She turned to find him looking not at the centerpieces, but at her. He'd changed for the event, wearing a charcoal gray suit that made his eyes look like rain clouds before a storm. A light dusting of flour still clung to his rolled-up sleeves, testament to hours of baking. "You look," he started, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean that dress." Isabelle felt warmth creep into her cheeks. She'd chosen the dress carefully, sage green silk that moved like water, with small embroidered leaves climbing from hem to waist. "Thank you," she said softly. "You look very nice too, Mr. Wizard." Nate bounded over, wearing a bow tie decorated with tiny leaves that he'd insisted on making himself. "Look, Mrs. Bradford says my name cards are the best she's ever seen, and she's seen lots of fancy parties." Silas knelt to straighten Nate's bow tie with gentle hands. "She's right. You've done an amazing job, Nate." In fact, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I made something special for my favorite leaf expert." Nate's eyes widened as he carefully unwrapped the package to reveal cookies decorated to look like autumn leaves, each one hand-painted with edible watercolors in exact replicas of the leaves from his collection. "They're too pretty to eat." "Nothing's too pretty to eat if it's made with care," Silas replied, his usual reserve melting at Nate's joy. "These are your designs, after all. I just borrowed them." Isabelle watched their interaction, her throat tight with emotion. In the few days since they'd met Silas, Nate had bloomed like one of her carefully tended plants. He'd always been sweet and enthusiastic, but now he had someone else who saw the magic in his way of viewing the world. "Bells, look!" Nate held up a cookie that perfectly matched the maple leaf he'd found on their first visit to the cafe. "It's like holding autumn." "They're wonderful," she managed, meeting Silas's eyes over her brother's head. "Thank you." Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of how their lives had begun to intertwine like vines reaching for sunlight. The moment broke as guests began arriving. Isabelle watched in amazement as Silas transformed into the consummate host, his natural reserve channeling into quiet confidence as he directed servers and greeted guests. She found herself moving in sync with him, anticipating needs before they arose, their silent coordination like a well-rehearsed dance. "My dear, you've worked miracles," Mrs. Bradford gushed, taking in the transformed community center. "And these pastries. Silas, you've outdone yourself." "It was a team effort," Silas replied, his hand ghosting briefly across Isabelle's lower back as he passed. The touch, though fleeting, sent warmth spreading through her body. The evening progressed smoothly. Nate, charming guest with his encyclopedic knowledge of leaves and his earnest explanations of each name card's design. Isabelle noticed how people responded to her brother's pure enthusiasm, how their initial awkwardness melted into genuine interest. During a quiet moment, she found Silas standing slightly apart from the crowd, watching Nate demonstrate proper leaf-pressing technique to an enraptured group of hospital board members. "He's amazing," Silas said softly as she joined him. "The way he sees beauty in things most people overlook." "Like someone else I know," Isabelle replied, thinking of carefully arranged teacups and lovingly crafted bread. "Thank you, by the way, for the cookies, for everything." Silas turned to face her, and in the warm evening light, his carefully maintained control seemed to slip just slightly. "Isabelle, there you are." Mrs. Bradford's voice cut through the moment. "The director wants to thank you both personally. Come, come." As they followed Mrs. Bradford, Silas's hand found Isabelle's, squeezing gently. She squeezed back, a silent acknowledgement of words unspoken. The hospital director, Dr. Winters, was a tall woman with kind eyes and silver hair. "Mrs. Bradford has told me wonderful things about you both," she said warmly, "and young Nate's artwork is extraordinary. We've been looking for ways to make our pediatric wing more welcoming." Isabelle felt Silas tense beside her, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly around hers. She knew he was thinking of his mother, of hospitals and loss and words left unsaid. "Actually," she found herself saying, "I've been considering starting a community garden project. Something therapeutic, where patients could spend time with nature. Nate's wonderful with children, and his leaf art could brighten any space." Dr. Winters's eyes lit up. "That's exactly what we need. And with your botanical expertise, Silas, would you consider allowing some of your herb gardens to be part of the project? Your cafe's location would be perfect for community involvement." Silas was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing absent patterns on Isabelle's hand. Finally, he spoke softly. "My mother would have loved that idea. She always said gardens were the best medicine. Then it's settled." Mrs. Bradford clapped her hands. "Oh, this is wonderful. The perfect combination of talents. As the two older women moved away, already deep in planning discussion, Silas turned to Isabelle. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, she replied simply. Sometimes healing happens best in gardens. Trust me, I'm a botanist. A genuine smile broke across his face, transforming his features. Is that your professional opinion, Dr. Hart? Absolutely, Mr. Wizard, she teased back, delighting in his surprised laugh. Their moment was interrupted by Nate rushing over, excitement radiating from every movement. Bells, Mr. Wizard, Dr. Winters says I can design leaf murals for the children's rooms, and she wants to learn proper leaf pressing technique. That's wonderful, Nate. Isabelle beamed, her heart full at her brother's happiness. Can we celebrate with hot chocolate? Nate asked hopefully. Mr. Wizard makes the best hot chocolate. He told me the secret ingredient this morning. Silas raised an eyebrow. Did I now? Yep. It's love, just like Mom used to say. Right, Bells? Isabelle felt tears prick at her eyes. Their mother had always said that about her cooking, that love was the secret ingredient that made everything taste better. She hadn't heard Nate mention their parents so casually, so happily since the accident. Silas seemed to understand the weight of the moment. Your mom was very wise, Nate. And yes, we can definitely celebrate with hot chocolate. In fact, he glanced at his watch. The event's winding down and I happen to prepare some special drinking chocolate back at the cafe, with homemade marshmallows. Real marshmallows? Nate's eyes widened. Bells, can we go, please? Isabelle looked around the community center. Most guests were leaving and the cleanup crew Mrs. Bradford had hired was already at work. I suppose we could... Excellent, Silas said, offering her his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. Shall we? The walk to Moonlight Brew was magical in the evening light. Nate skipped ahead, pointing out his favorite trees and describing his plans for the hospital murals. Isabelle found herself leaning slightly into Silas's warmth, their steps falling naturally in sync. The cafe was dark when they arrived, but Silas's practiced movements as he unlocked the door and moved through the space made it feel like coming home. Soon, the familiar whistle accompanied the preparation of what he called his special occasion hot chocolate. The secret, he told Nate conspiratorially as he worked, is using 3 different kinds of chocolate. And yes, plenty of love. They settled at a corner table, Nate proudly displaying his cookie collection while Silas served steaming mugs topped with cloud-like homemade marshmallows. The chocolate was rich and complex with hints of vanilla and something deeper, cinnamon maybe or cardamom. This is better than Mom's, Nate declared, then immediately looked guilty. I mean, it's okay to find new things to love, Isabelle assured him, her hand finding his. Mom would be happy about that. She'd be proud of you both, Silas said quietly, just as my mother would have adored this evening. Sometimes, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes love grows in new ways like a garden replanted. Isabelle met his eyes across the table, understanding flowing between them. They were all learning to bloom again in their own ways. Nate with his art and newfound confidence. Silas opening his carefully ordered world to include their chaos. And herself, discovering that caring for others didn't mean she couldn't also be cared for. The evening wrapped around them like a warm blanket as they sat there, sharing chocolate and stories and comfortable silences. Outside, Pine Valley settled into its nighttime quiet, stars peeking through the coastal fog. Inside Moonlight Brew, something new was taking root, something as delicate as Nate's pressed leaves, as strong as Silas's bread, as promising as the garden they would grow together. When Nate finally began to yawn, his sugar rush fading, Isabelle knew it was time to head home. At the door, Silas hesitated, then spoke softly. Thank you for everything today, for understanding about the hospital project, about my mother. Thank you for the magic, she replied, equally soft. The cookies, the chocolate, the way you see him, see us. Their goodbye lingered, full of words not yet ready to be spoken. As Isabelle and Nate walked home through the starlit streets, she found herself touching her forget-me-not pendant and smiling. Sometimes, she thought, the most beautiful gardens grew from unexpected seeds planted in just the right moment. Morning dew still clung to the grass as Isabelle surveyed the space behind Moonlight Brew. The small yard, previously unused except for a few herb containers, held so much potential she could almost see the garden it would become. Her trained botanist's eye picked out sunny spots perfect for healing herbs, shaded areas where delicate flowers could thrive, and the perfect corner for a small seating area where hospital patients could find peace. I brought your tea. Silas's voice came from behind her, and Isabelle turned to find him holding not just her usual chamomile, but also a notebook and what appeared to be his mother's old garden journal. The morning light caught his blue-gray eyes, making them seem almost transparent with sincerity. I found this last night, he said, handing her both the tea and the worn leather journal. My mother kept detailed notes about everything she grew here. I thought, maybe it could help with the new garden. Isabelle carefully opened the journal, touched by the gesture. Inside, beautiful handwriting detailed soil conditions, planting times, and hand-drawn diagrams of garden layouts. Pressed flowers marked different sections, their colors still vibrant despite the years. Silas, this is... She traced a perfectly preserved lavender sprig with gentle fingers. Thank you for sharing this with me. He moved closer, looking over her shoulder at the pages. She would have liked you, he said softly. Your gentleness with plants, your patience with people. She was like that too. The morning air seemed to still around them, heavy with unspoken words. Isabelle could feel the warmth of him behind her, could smell the familiar scent of bread and coffee that always clung to his clothes. Her heart thundered in her chest as his hand came up to point at a particular diagram. This was her favorite layout, he said, his voice low near her ear. She called it her healing circle. Different plants for different needs, arranged so visitors could walk through them like a story. It's beautiful, Isabelle managed, trying to focus on the drawing rather than the way his presence made her skin tingle. We could adapt this for the hospital project, maybe add some sensory elements for the children. Bells! Mr. Wizard! Nate's enthusiastic voice broke through their moment as he bounded into the yard, arms full of his leaf collection and drawing supplies. I finished all the designs for the hospital rooms. Want to see? Silas stepped back and Isabelle immediately missed his warmth. But watching him crouch down to examine Nate's drawings with genuine interest made her heart swell in a different way. These are exceptional, Nate, Silas said, carefully handling each sketch. The way you've incorporated different leaf patterns for different age groups. Very thoughtful. Nate beamed under the praise. I made this one special, he said, pulling out a particular drawing. It's for the garden, see? I put your herbs here, Mr. Wizard, and Belle's flowers there, and a special spot for my leaf-pressing station. Isabelle watched as Silas studied the drawing with the same serious attention he gave to his baking. You've really thought this through, he said. Would you like to help me clear some space? We could start marking out the beds today. Really? Nate's entire face lit up. Can we, Bells, please? Of course, she smiled, setting down her tea and the journal. But first, let's get you into proper gardening clothes. You don't want to get your new sweater dirty. I have some old aprons inside, Silas offered. And I made fresh scones, can't garden on an empty stomach. The morning unfolded like a flower opening to the sun. They worked together seamlessly, Silas and Isabelle clearing old debris while Nate marked out paths with stones he deemed perfectly shaped for garden magic. The physical labor felt good, grounding, and Isabelle found herself stealing glances at Silas as he worked. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms dusted with flour from his earlier baking. His usual precise movements had relaxed into something more natural, more free, as he helped Nate arrange stones and debate the perfect spot for each planned feature. The jasmine should go here, Isabelle suggested, pointing to a sunny wall. It'll climb beautifully and the scent will be therapeutic for patients. Like your chamomile tea, Nate piped up. Mr. Wizard says it's magic because it makes people feel better just by smelling it. Silas ducked his head, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. I just meant that sometimes comfort comes from unexpected places, like finding a perfect leaf, Nate nodded sagely, or making bread with friends, or when Bells smiles at you, Mr. Wizard. That seems to make you feel better too. This time both adults blushed, carefully avoiding each other's eyes. Nate, oblivious to their embarrassment, continued arranging his stones with careful precision. I should check on the afternoon bake, Silas said suddenly, brushing dirt from his hands. Would you both like to stay for lunch? I'm trying a new soup recipe. Yes, Nate answered before Isabelle could speak. Can you teach me more about bread braiding? And maybe Bells can help with the herbs since she's a plant doctor. Something soft passed across Silas's face as he looked at them. Nate with his enthusiasm, Isabelle with her dirt-smudged hands and flower-clipped hair. I'd like that, he said quietly. I'd like that very much. Inside the cafe, the familiar sense of baking wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Isabelle helped Nate wash up while Silas moved through his kitchen with practiced grace, pulling out ingredients and humming softly under his breath. "Here," he said, handing Nate a small ball of dough. "Try the technique I showed you yesterday. Remember gentle but confident movements." As Nate concentrated on his braiding, Silas turned to Isabelle. "Would you mind helping with the herbs? Your touch with plants? I trust your instincts." The simple statement meant more than its surface meaning, and they both knew it. Isabelle nodded, moving to the herb wall where small pots of greenery thrived. Her fingers brushed against rosemary, thyme, basil, each plant carefully tended, despite Silas's busy schedule. "You have a good touch yourself," she said softly. "These are all thriving." "I talk to them sometimes," he admitted, close enough that only she could hear, "like my mother used to. She said plants like people grow better with gentle words." "She was right," Isabelle replied, thinking of how Nate had bloomed under Silas's kind attention. "Everything grows better with care." Their eyes met over the herbs, and something electric passed between them. Silas took a step closer, his hand reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered near her cheek, and Isabelle felt her breath catch. "You have dirt," he murmured, but didn't move his hand away. "Right here." "I did it." Nate's triumphant voice broke through the moment. "Look, my braid is perfect this time." They stepped apart quickly, both turning to admire Nate's handiwork. The braid was indeed beautifully done, each strand even and carefully placed. "Outstanding," Silas praised, his voice slightly rough. "You're becoming quite the baker." The afternoon passed in a comfortable rhythm of baking, gardening, and planning. Regular customers came and went, many stopping to admire the garden's progress through the windows. Several offered plants from their own gardens for the project, touched by the idea of creating a healing space. As the day wound down, Isabelle found herself reluctant to leave. The cafe had begun to feel like home, Silas's careful movements and Nate's joyful presence creating a harmony she hadn't known she was missing. "Same time tomorrow?" Silas asked as they prepared to leave, his usual reserve softened by the day's shared work. "The garden won't build itself." "Yes," Nate answered immediately, "and I'll bring my special leaf press to show the proper technique." Isabelle nodded, unable to suppress her smile. "We'll be here." As they walked home in the gathering dusk, Nate chattering excitedly about his baking achievements, Isabelle touched her cheek where Silas's fingers had lingered. The garden wasn't the only thing growing in unexpected ways. Back in the cafe, Silas stood at the window watching them leave. His normally pristine space was somewhat disheveled, dirt on the floor, herbs scattered on the counter, the lingering chaos of Nate's enthusiastic baking. But instead of feeling anxious about the disorder, he felt strangely peaceful. He picked up his mother's garden journal, left open on the counter. A pressed forget-me-not fell from between its pages, the same flower he'd seen on Isabelle's pendant. Carefully, he placed it in his pocket next to Nate's latest leaf drawing. Some things, he was learning, were more important than perfect order. Some people were worth a little chaos. The first storm of autumn caught Pine Valley by surprise. Rain drummed against moonlight-bruised windows as Silas paced behind the counter, checking his phone for the 5th time in as many minutes. Isabelle and Nate were late. They'd never been late before. A crash of thunder made him jump, nearly dropping the cup he'd been absently polishing. They should have been here an hour ago. The garden tools lay waiting by the back door, the special hot chocolate he'd prepared growing cold. Even the fresh lavender scones, Nate's favorite, sat untouched. The bell above the door chimed, and Silas looked up eagerly only to find Mrs. Bradford hurrying in from the rain. "Goodness, what weather!" she exclaimed, shaking out her umbrella. "Silas, dear, have you heard about the mudslide on Oak Street? They've closed the whole road." His heart stopped. Oak Street. That was where Isabelle and Nate lived. "When?" he demanded, already reaching for his coat. "Was anyone hurt?" "They're evacuating the whole block as a precaution," Mrs. Bradford called after him, but Silas was already out the door, flipping the closed sign as he went. The rain pelted his face as he ran, each step accompanied by a prayer he hadn't dared to voice in years. Not them. Please, not them. He'd already lost his mother to things beyond his control. He couldn't bear to lose. He rounded the corner onto Oak Street and stopped dead. A section of the hillside had given way, mud and debris blocking half the road. Emergency vehicles filled the street, their lights painting the rain in alternating red and blue. "Silas." The voice cut through the chaos like a beacon. He turned to see Nate waving frantically from beneath a Red Cross tent, and beside him, thank God, was Isabelle. He reached them in what felt like a single stride, his carefully maintained composure crumbling as he pulled them both into a fierce embrace. "We're okay," Isabelle said softly, her hands clutching his coat. "Our house is up the hill. We're just being evacuated as a precaution, but we're okay." Silas pulled back slightly, his eyes scanning them for any sign of injury. They were both wet and muddy, but unharmed. Nate clutched his precious leaf collection to his chest, while Isabelle had managed to save a small box of what looked like family photos. "Mr. Wizard," Nate's voice trembled slightly, "I couldn't save my garden drawings. They were on the table by the window, and when they told us to hurry, we'll make new ones," Silas assured him, keeping one arm around Isabelle as she shivered in the rain. "Better ones." Together, a firefighter approached them, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Hart, we've arranged temporary accommodation at the Pine Valley Inn, but it might be a few days before." "They're staying with me," Silas interrupted, surprising himself with his certainty. "I have plenty of room above the cafe." Isabelle looked up at him, her gold-rimmed glasses spotted with rain. "Silas, we couldn't impose—" "Please," he said softly, "just for her. Let me help. Let me—" He struggled for words. "Let me be there." Something in his voice must have reached her because she nodded, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork and arrangements. Silas handled everything with quiet efficiency, his natural organizational skills focusing on what needed to be done. They salvaged what they could from the house: clothes, Nate's school supplies, Isabelle's work materials. By the time they reached Moonlight Brew, the rain had softened to a gentle patter. Silas led them up the narrow stairs behind the cafe to his private apartment. He'd never brought anyone here before. This space had been his sanctuary, his carefully ordered retreat from the world. "It's beautiful," Isabelle breathed, taking in the open-plan living space with its wall of windows overlooking the town. Plants lined every windowsill, descendants of his mother's collection, each one tended with precise care. "The spare room is through there," Silas gestured, suddenly self-conscious. "And Nate can take my room. I'll sleep on the couch." "No, I can't take your—" Isabelle started to protest, but Silas shook his head. "Please, I want you both to feel at home here. Home." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. "Hot chocolate?" he offered, needing something to do with his hands. "And there are fresh scones downstairs." "Yes, please." Nate perked up, though his usual boundless energy was subdued. "Can I help? Like we always do?" "Of course." Silas smiled, grateful for the boy's resilience. "Why don't you both get changed into dry clothes first? I put some towels in the bathroom, and there are spare sweaters in the dresser if you need them." While they changed, Silas moved through his kitchen with mechanical precision, preparing their usual evening ritual, but his hands shook slightly as he reached for the cups, white fading to cream, then soft blue. How quickly they had become essential to his carefully structured world. When Isabelle emerged wearing one of his old sweaters, hair damp and curling around her face, Silas nearly dropped the mug he was holding. Something about seeing her in his clothes and his space made his heart stutter in his chest. Nate followed, swimming in another of Silas's sweaters but looking more like himself. "Mr. Wizard, your apartment is like a secret garden. Look at all the plants. Do you talk to them too?" "Every morning," Silas admitted, handling Nate a cookie-laden plate. "Just like your sister taught me." They settled into his living room, the rain creating a cozy backdrop to their conversation. Nate spread his rescued leaf collection on the coffee table, carefully checking each specimen for damage. "Most of them are okay," he reported, relief evident in his voice. "And look, I saved the special maple leaf from our first day at the cafe." Isabelle, curled up in an armchair with her hot chocolate, smiled at her brother's enthusiasm, but Silas could see the tension in her shoulders, the worry she was trying to hide. "The insurance will cover everything," he said quietly, moving to perch on the arm of her chair. "And you can stay here as long as you need." "I mean that." She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Why are you so good to us?" The question caught him off guard, but in that moment, rain falling softly outside and his apartment filled with their presence, Silas found his careful walls crumbling. "Because you make me feel alive," he whispered, so only she could hear. "Because Nate's joy makes everything brighter. Because you see me, really see me, and you stay anyway, because—" "Look!" Nate's excited voice interrupted as he pressed his face against the window. A rainbow. They joined him at the window, watching as the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Silas felt Isabelle's hand slip into his and he squeezed it gently. Mom always said rainbows were nature's way of making promises, Nate said softly. Do you think she'd be happy we're here with Mr. Wizard? Isabelle's breath caught and Silas felt her tremble slightly beside him. Without thinking, he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing both her and Nate close. I think, he said carefully, that love has a way of finding us when we need it most. Sometimes through rain, sometimes through rainbows, sometimes through a cup of chamomile tea on a stormy morning. Nate nodded sagely. Like how you found us, or we found you, or maybe we found each other. Maybe all of those things, Isabelle whispered, leaning slightly into Silas's embrace. They stood there together, watching the rainbow fade as the sun set behind the mountains. Outside, Pine Valley glistened in the aftermath of the storm, streets washed clean, trees dripping silver in the fading light. Later that night, after Nate had fallen asleep surrounded by his rescued treasures, Silas found Isabelle on the small balcony off the kitchen. She stood with her face tilted up to the clearing sky, his sweater hanging loose on her frame. Thank you, she said without turning, for everything, for being someone Nate can trust, for being someone I can. She trailed off, but Silas understood. Carefully giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he stepped up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned back against him with a soft sigh. Stay, he whispered into her hair, not just until your house is fixed. Stay because this place is too quiet without Nate's laughter. Stay because my plants miss your gentle hands. Stay because He couldn't finish. Years of carefully maintained control warring with the words in his heart. But Isabelle turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his face. Yes, she said simply, and in that word was every unspoken thing between them. Above them, stars emerged from behind the dissipating clouds, reflecting in the puddles below like scattered wishes. In his apartment, Nate slept peacefully, surrounded by the pressed leaves that had first brought them together. And here, on a small balcony above a cafe in Pine Valley, two people who had forgotten how to trust began to learn the language of love again, spoken in gentle touches, shared silences, and the promise of tomorrow's dawn. Dawn painted Silas's apartment in shades of gold as he stood in his kitchen, watching the sunrise through steam rising from his coffee cup. The familiar silence of his morning routine was different now, filled with soft sounds of life, Nate's gentle snoring from the bedroom, the rustle of Isabelle turning pages in the guest room where she'd insisted on sleeping, despite his offer of his bed. A week had passed since the mudslide, and his carefully ordered world had transformed into something both chaotic and beautiful. Evidence of their presence was everywhere. Nate's pressed leaves arranged on the windowsills, Isabelle's botanical texts stacked neatly on the coffee table, a collection of their shared mugs, white fading to cream, then soft blue, left out from last night's hot chocolate. The sound of a door opening drew his attention. Isabelle emerged from the guest room, wrapped in one of his old cardigans she'd claimed as her own. Her hair was sleep mussed, glasses slightly askew, and Silas felt his heart twist at how right she looked in his space. You're up early, she said softly, padding over to join him at the kitchen counter. Without thinking, he reached for her usual chamomile tea, their morning dance now as natural as breathing. I always am, he replied, but his typical precision felt softer somehow. The bread won't bake itself, she smiled, accepting the tea he offered. I've been thinking about the garden. Now that the rain stopped, we could start the actual planting. I found some notes in your mother's journal about autumn herbs that might work well. Silas nodded, trying to focus on her words rather than the way morning light caught in her hair. I'd like that. The hospital committee approved all of Nate's designs yesterday. Dr. Winters was particularly impressed with his ideas for the children's section. He's so excited about it, Isabelle said, her face softening with pride. I haven't seen him this passionate about a project since, she paused, touching her forget-me-not pendant, since before we lost our parents. Silas set down his coffee cup and reached for her hand, the gesture now familiar and essential. He's amazing. You both are. Their eyes met over their joined hands and something electric passed between them. Since that night on the balcony, they'd been dancing around the shift in their relationship, both aware of it but neither quite ready to name it. Silas, Isabelle started, but was interrupted by the sound of Nate's door opening. Morning. Nate bounded into the kitchen, already fully dressed in what he called his official garden clothes, old jeans and one of Silas's aprons that they'd modified to fit him. Are we planting today? I've been practicing my seed spacing like you showed me, Bells. The moment broke, but the warmth remained as they fell into their new morning routine. Silas prepared breakfast while Isabelle helped Nate organize his planting tools. The domestic scene felt so natural it made his chest ache. "Mr. Wizard," Nate asked between bites of cinnamon toast, "can we use the special bread recipe today? The one from your mom's book?" Silas looked up from where he'd been reviewing the day's baking schedule. "The herb bread? I haven't made that since." "Please?" Nate's eyes were earnest. "I think it would be perfect for the garden opening. And maybe," he glanced at Isabelle, then back at Silas, "maybe it's time to make happy memories with it." The simple wisdom in Nate's words struck Silas deeply. He looked at Isabelle, who was watching him with understanding in her eyes, and felt something shift in his heart. "You're right," he said softly. "Some recipes are meant to be shared." They spent the morning in the cafe's kitchen, Silas teaching them his mother's special herb bread recipe. His usual precise movements became gentle demonstrations as he showed Nate how to knead the dough properly, how to incorporate the fresh herbs without bruising them. "The secret," he explained, guiding Nate's hands, "is to treat the dough like you treat your leaves, with respect and patience." Isabelle worked beside them, her botanical knowledge adding new dimensions to the herb combinations. The kitchen filled with the scent of rising bread and fresh herbs, mingling with the sound of their laughter and shared stories. "Your mother would love this," Isabelle said quietly as she helped Silas shape the loaves. Their hands brushed in the flour, leaving traces of white on her sleeve. Seeing her recipe bringing joy again, Silas had to swallow hard before he could respond. "She would have loved you both," he managed. "The way you make everything feel alive." The morning passed in a warm blur of baking and preparation for the garden. Regular customers came and went, many stopping to admire Nate's careful work with the herbs or to pre-order loaves of the special bread for the garden opening. By afternoon, they were ready to begin the actual planting. The garden space behind the cafe had been transformed over the past week. Raised beds built, paths laid, and a small seating area created where patients could rest. "Remember," Isabelle instructed as they worked, "each plant needs its own space to grow. Like people, they thrive best when they have room to be themselves." Silas watched as she guided Nate's hands in planting lavender, explaining how the roots needed to spread. Her teaching style reminded him of his mother's, gentle but firm, full of understanding for living things. "The roots are like fingers reaching for friends," Nate observed, carefully patting soil around a small plant. "They want to connect, but they also need their own space." "Exactly," Isabelle smiled, shooting a meaningful glance at Silas. "Sometimes the strongest connections grow slowly, with respect for each other's nature." The afternoon sun warmed them as they worked, and Silas found himself storing away small moments like treasures. The way Isabelle's hands moved so surely among the plants, how Nate's face lit up when a butterfly visited his newly planted flowers, the comfortable silence that fell between them as they created something beautiful together. As the day wound down, Dr. Winters stopped by to check on their progress. "This is remarkable," she said, taking in the transformation. "The patients are so excited about the opening next week, and Nate, your leaf art is already bringing smiles to the children's ward." Nate beamed with pride, showing her his latest designs. While they talked, Silas noticed Isabelle had slipped away to the small herb section they dedicated to his mother's favorites. He found her kneeling there, gently touching the leaves of a thriving sage plant. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked softly. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I was thinking about roots," she said, "about how sometimes the things that seem to uproot us, like losing our home, actually help us find where we truly belong." Silas knelt beside her, his hand finding hers among the herbs. "And where do you belong?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Isabelle turned to face him fully, her free hand coming up to touch his cheek. "I think," she whispered, "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." The evening light caught in her glasses, making her eyes shine like amber. Silas felt years of careful control melting away as he leaned forward, drawn by something stronger than gravity. "Bells, Mr. Wizard, look what Dr. Winters gave me." Nate's voice broke through the moment, and they pulled apart slowly, both smiling at his excitement as he bounded over with a professional set of art supplies. Later that night, after Nate had fallen asleep surrounded by his new art materials, Silas found Isabelle on their balcony again. She wore his cardigan, her hair loose around her shoulders, and the sight of her in his space felt like coming home. "Thank you," she said as he joined her, for making space for us in your life. I know it hasn't been easy having your routine disrupted. No, he interrupted gently, turning her to face him. Thank you for showing me that some disruptions are worth every moment of chaos they bring. Under the stars, with the scent of herb bread and garden soil still clinging to their clothes, they stood together in comfortable silence. Below them, Pine Valley settled into its evening quiet, and in the garden, newly planted herbs reached their roots toward each other, growing stronger together than they ever could alone. The morning of the garden opening dawned clear and crisp, autumn sunlight sparkling on dew-kissed leaves. Silas stood in his kitchen, staring at the small velvet box in his hands. Inside nestled a delicate silver necklace, its pendant a perfect replica of a forget-me-not flower, designed to match the one Isabelle always wore. He'd spent weeks working with a local jeweler to get it just right, each petal carefully crafted to catch the light like morning dew. The inscription on the back read simply, "For new memories to bloom beside the old." "Mr. Wizard?" Nate's voice made him quickly pocket the box. "Can I ask you something important?" Silas turned to find Nate standing in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically serious in his carefully chosen outfit for the garden opening. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Nate twisted his hands together, reminding Silas so much of Isabelle when she was nervous. "Do you love my sister?" The question, so direct and innocent, caught Silas off guard, but looking at Nate's earnest face, he knew only honesty would do. "Yes," he said softly. "Very much." Nate's face broke into a brilliant smile. "Good. Because she loves you too. I can tell by the way she looks at you when you're baking, like you're the most amazing thing she's ever seen. Even better than her favorite rare orchids." Silas felt warmth spread through his chest. "And how would you feel about that? About me loving your sister?" "I already decided your family," Nate said matter-of-factly. "You understand about special things like how leaves have stories and bread needs love to rise properly. And you make Bells smile like she used to before Mom and Dad went to heaven." Emotion closed Silas's throat as he pulled Nate into a tight hug. "Thank you," he whispered. "That means everything to me." The sound of the guest room door opening made them pull apart. Isabelle emerged wearing a sage-green dress that made her eyes look like sunlit amber behind her gold-rimmed glasses. She'd woven small flowers into her hair, and Silas felt his heart stop at the sight of her. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing their emotional state. "Perfect," Nate answered with a knowing smile. "Mr. Wizard was just helping me with a special project for the opening." The morning passed in a whirlwind of preparation, the cafe filled with the scent of herb bread baking, as Silas prepared his mother's recipe and quantity for the first time in years. Isabelle and Nate put finishing touches on the garden, arranging small signs identifying each plant and its healing properties. By afternoon, the space behind Moonlight Brew had transformed into something magical. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees. Nate's pressed leaf art decorated the walls, and the newly planted garden seemed to glow in the autumn light. "It's beautiful," Dr. Winters breathed as she arrived early to preview the space. "The patients are going to love this, especially the children's section. Nate, your butterfly garden is inspired." Nate beamed with pride, showing her how he'd arranged the plants to attract different species of butterflies. "And look," he pointed to a special corner. "We made a memorial garden too, with Mr. Wizard's mom's favorite flowers and the ones our parents loved. So they can all be part of the healing too." Silas felt Isabelle's hand slip into his as they watched Nate explain his design. The memorial garden had been his idea, a way to honor those they'd lost while celebrating new growth. People began arriving, the garden filling with community members and hospital staff. Mrs. Bradford fluttered about, proudly telling anyone who would listen how she'd introduced the dream team behind the project. "You've created something extraordinary here," a quiet voice said behind them. They turned to find an elderly man in a wheelchair, his hospital badge identifying him as a long-term patient. "My granddaughter is in the children's ward. She hasn't smiled in weeks, but when they brought her to see the leaf art yesterday..." He paused, emotions overwhelming him. "Thank you, all of you." Nate approached the man with gentle confidence. "Would you like to see how to press leaves? I could teach your granddaughter too. It helps make sad days better." As Nate led the man through the garden, explaining his techniques, Silas felt the small box in his pocket grow heavy with meaning. He turned to Isabelle, gathering his courage. "Would you walk with me? There's something I'd like to show you." He led her to a quiet corner of the garden where a single forget-me-not plant bloomed out of season, its tiny blue flowers catching the late afternoon light. "How?" Isabelle breathed, kneeling to examine the rare autumn bloom. "These shouldn't flower now. Sometimes," Silas said softly, kneeling beside her. "The most beautiful things happen when we least expect them. Like a young woman walking into my cafe asking for chamomile tea. Like her brother teaching me to see magic in fallen leaves. Like finding a family I didn't know I was missing." Isabelle turned to him, her eyes bright with understanding. "Silas." He took out the velvet box, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. "I know it's soon. I know we're still learning each other's rhythms, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The house is almost repaired," he continued, watching emotions play across her face. "And if you want to move back there, I'll understand. But I'm hoping you'll stay. Both of you. Not because you need a place to live, but because this has become your home too. Because you've made my carefully ordered world so much richer with your presence. Because I love you, Isabelle Hart, and I want to spend the rest of my life learning new ways to show you how much." Tears spilled down Isabelle's cheeks as she touched the necklace with trembling fingers. "It's perfect," she whispered, "just like the day we met." "Is that a yes?" he asked, heart thundering in his chest. Instead of answering, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and sweet, and tasted of happy tears, everything a first kiss should be. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Yes," she breathed. 1,000 times yes. The sound of applause made them look up to find their entire audience watching. Nate stood at the front, practically bouncing with joy. "Finally!" he exclaimed, rushing to hug them both. "I thought you'd never ask her, Mr. Wizard. Can I show everyone my special project now?" Before they could respond, Nate pulled out a large piece of art paper. On it, he'd created an intricate design using pressed flowers and leaves, forming a family portrait. There was Isabelle with her botanical books, Silas with his bread and teacups, and Nate himself surrounded by butterflies and leaves. Above them all, 2 sets of parents watched from clouds made of flower petals. "See?" Nate explained to the crowd. "All our love stories together. Old ones and new ones, sad ones and happy ones. Because that's what gardens are for, right? Growing new beautiful things while remembering what came before." Silas felt Isabelle's hand tighten in his as they looked at Nate's creation. In the fading afternoon light, with their community around them and love blooming as naturally as the flowers in their garden, everything felt possible. Later that night, after the celebrations had wound down and Nate had fallen asleep clutching his art supplies, Silas and Isabelle stood on their balcony. The forget-me-not necklace glinted at her throat, catching starlight like promises made real. "I love you," she said softly, turning in his arms, "for seeing us both so completely, for making space in your life for our chaos, for understanding that love grows better with gentle hands and patient hearts." Under the autumn stars, with the scent of herb bread and garden roses rising from below, Silas held his future in his arms and knew that some things were worth waiting for, worth working for, worth blooming for. The weeks following the garden opening brought changes as subtle and beautiful as autumn leaves turning color. Moonlight Brew had transformed from a quiet cafe into a heart of community healing, with the garden drawing visitors from all over Pine Valley. But the most profound changes happened in the quiet moments, in the small details of their shared life. Silas stood at his kitchen counter early one morning, watching Isabelle tuck herbs into small bouquets for the day's hospital deliveries. She wore one of his old sweaters over her dress, the forget-me-not necklace catching early light at her throat. Her engagement ring, a delicate band with tiny flowers engraved around it, glinted as she worked. "What are you thinking about?" she asked without looking up, a smile playing at her lips. "You're doing that thing where you get lost in thought and forget to breathe." He moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "I'm thinking about how different everything is. A few months ago I arranged my teacups by color just to maintain some sense of control. Now there are pressed leaves between your cookbooks and art supplies on every surface," she teased, leaning back against him. "Now there's life," he corrected softly. "Real, messy, beautiful life." The sound of Nate's bedroom door opening made them smile but not separate. These quiet moments of affection had become natural, welcomed. Morning. Nate bounded into the kitchen, already dressed in what he called his official hospital clothes, neat jeans and a button-down shirt with embroidered leaves that Isabelle had found for him. Ready for the big day? Today marked the first official art therapy session Nate would lead at the children's ward. Dr. Winters had been so impressed with how the young patients responded to his leaf-pressing demonstrations that she'd proposed a regular program. "Almost ready," Isabelle replied, adding a sprig of lavender to her last bouquet. Did you pack all your supplies? Everything's ready. Nate gestured proudly to his carefully organized art bag. And Mr. Wizard made special cookies for everyone. They look like little paint palettes. Silas smiled, remembering how he'd stayed up late decorating each cookie to look like an artist's palette, complete with tiny dots of paint made from colored icing. Well, every artist needs proper supplies. As they prepared for the day, Silas marveled at how smoothly they moved around each other. A family choreography perfected over shared mornings and quiet evenings. Isabelle packed Nate's lunch while Silas prepared their usual breakfast. Heart-shaped pancakes for Nate, chamomile tea for Isabelle, coffee for himself. I had an idea, Nate announced between bites of pancake. For the wedding. Silas and Isabelle exchanged glances. They hadn't started planning yet, content to enjoy their engagement and let things unfold naturally. What kind of idea? Isabelle asked, adjusting her glasses in that way she did when trying to hide emotion. Well, Nate set down his fork, suddenly serious. I was thinking about how Mom and Dad can't be there, and Mr. Wizard's mom too, but maybe we could have the ceremony in the garden. With the memorial section right there, it's like they're part of it. And I could make special pressed flower decorations with all their favorite flowers mixed together. Silas felt Isabelle's hand find his under the table, as they both processed Nate's suggestion. The idea of getting married surrounded by the garden they'd built together, with memories of their loved ones blooming alongside new beginnings. That's perfect, Isabelle said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Absolutely perfect. The drive to the hospital was filled with Nate's excited chatter about his lesson plans. He'd carefully designed activities for different age groups and ability levels, showing the same attention to detail he used in his leaf pressing. Remember, Isabelle said as they pulled into the parking lot, if you get overwhelmed or need a break. I know, Nate smiled reassuringly. I can always call you or Mr. Wizard, but I won't need to. Teaching art is like sharing magic. It makes everyone feel better. Silas helped carry supplies while Isabelle distributed her herb bouquets to various wards. The hospital had changed since they'd started their garden project. Corridors once stark and clinical now featured Nate's leaf art, and the scent of fresh herbs brought life to sterile spaces. In the children's ward, they found several young patients already waiting eagerly for Nate's class. One little girl, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf, ran up to hug him. You came, she exclaimed. I found the perfect leaf yesterday, just like you showed me. Nate's face lit up as he examined her treasure. This is beautiful, Lucy. It's exactly the right shade of red for our autumn collection. Want to help me set up the pressing stations? Watching Nate organize his class with gentle confidence, Silas felt overwhelmed with pride. This young man who saw beauty in fallen leaves had taught him so much about finding magic in unexpected places. He's amazing, Isabelle whispered, squeezing his hand. Sometimes I wonder who's really taking care of who. That's family, Silas replied softly. We take care of each other in different ways. As they left Nate to his teaching, they made their usual rounds through the garden. Patients sat among the herbs and flowers, some reading, others simply enjoying the peaceful space. The butterfly section Nate had designed attracted constant visitors, its inhabitants dancing between blooms like living art. Dr. Winters wants to expand the program, Isabelle mentioned as they walked. She's seen such improvement in patient recovery rates since we opened the garden. She thinks we could help other hospitals create similar spaces. Silas considered this as they reached the memorial section. Here, flowers chosen to honor both their families grew together, creating something new from cherished memories. We could, he said thoughtfully. The cafe can run itself for a few days at a time now that Luis has learned all the recipes. And Nate's art therapy program could be adapted for other children's wards. You'd want to? Isabelle turned to face him, surprise evident in her expression. I know how much you value your routine, your space. My love, he caught her hands in his. You and Nate have taught me that the best things in life happen when we're brave enough to grow beyond our carefully tended borders. Like these flowers. He gestured to the memorial garden. Sometimes the most beautiful blooms come from mixing different seeds together. Isabelle's eyes shone with tears as she reached up to touch his cheek. When did you get so wise about growing things? I had an excellent teacher, he smiled, leaning down to kiss her softly. Several, actually. My mother taught me about nurturing living things. Your parents, through you and Nate, taught me about resilience. And you, he brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. You taught me that love is worth any amount of beautiful chaos it brings. Their moment was interrupted by excited voices from the children's ward. They turned to see Nate leading his class in what appeared to be a leaf-finding expedition through the garden, each child clutching a handmade collecting basket. "Look, Mr. Wizard," Lucy called out, holding up a perfect maple leaf. "Nate says this one's the exact color of love." "She's right," Isabelle whispered, watching the children explore with such joy. "It is the color of love." Later that afternoon, they picked Nate up from his successful first class. He was tired but happy, his art bag full of pressed leaves and drawings his students had made for him. "Can we have hot chocolate to celebrate?" he asked as they drove home. "I want to tell you all about Lucy's special leaf collection and how Tommy learned to make butterfly patterns and—" "Of course we can," Silas smiled, catching Isabelle's eye in the rearview mirror. "Family celebrations require hot chocolate. It's a rule." At home, as they sat around their usual spots, Nate showing them his students' artwork, Isabelle adding new pressed flowers to their growing album, Silas serving his special hot chocolate, they felt the gentle rightness of their shared life. Outside, the garden bloomed under autumn skies, each flower and herb a testament to love's ability to grow in unexpected places. Inside, in an apartment above a cafe in Pine Valley, a family built from loss and hope and careful tending continued to bloom, proving that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow not from perfect plans, but from hearts brave enough to plant new seeds together. The autumn morning dawned crisp and bright as Isabelle stood in what was once just the spare room of Silas's apartment, but had now become undeniably hers. Her wedding dress hung by the window, catching early light like a dream made real. The design was simple but beautiful, flowing silk with delicate embroidered flowers climbing from hem to bodice, each bloom carefully chosen to represent their story. "Bells?" Nate's soft knock preceded his entrance. He wore a new suit, dark blue with a special boutonniere he'd made himself from pressed leaves and tiny flowers. "Are you ready?" "Mr. Wizard is practicing his bread braiding downstairs, which means he's nervous." She smiled, remembering how Silas always returned to his most precise baking when emotions threatened to overwhelm him. "How many loaves has he made?" "6. Nate grinned. "But they're beautiful. He's weaving them into this amazing pattern that looks like intertwined hearts. He says it's a traditional design his mother taught him for special occasions." Isabelle touched her forget-me-not necklace, its silver companion to her childhood pendant now a constant reminder of love, both old and new. "Could you help me with something? I need to get ready, but first—" She retrieved a small box from her dresser, opening it to reveal pressed flowers, some from their parents' favorite garden, others from the memorial section they'd created. "Would you help me add these to my bouquet? I want them all with us today." Nate's eyes filled with tears even as he smiled. "It's perfect. And look," he pulled out his own contribution, a perfectly preserved maple leaf, the same one from their first day at Moonlight Brew, "for your something old." Together, they worked carefully, weaving memories into fresh flowers until the bouquet became a beautiful blend of past and present. Through the open window, they could hear the happy buzz of activity in the garden below, where their small but meaningful wedding would soon take place. "Lucy helped me with the aisle decorations," Nate mentioned proudly, referring to his young art therapy student who had become like a little sister to them all. "She's getting so good at pressing flowers, and her latest scans were clear. Dr. Winters says the garden therapy program is helping everyone heal better." "You've done amazing things, Nate," Isabelle said softly, fixing his tie. "Mom and Dad would be so proud of the man you're becoming." A gentle knock interrupted their moment. Dr. Winters stood in the doorway, elegant in a deep purple dress. "Sorry to interrupt, but I have something for you." The children's ward worked on it together. She handed Isabelle a handmade book, its cover decorated with pressed flowers and leaves. Inside, each page contained artwork and messages from the patients they'd worked with through the garden program. Lucy's distinctive butterfly drawings filled several pages, accompanied by notes about how the garden had given her hope during treatment. Other patients and their families had contributed their own stories of healing and renewal. "You've changed lives here," Dr. Winters said warmly. "All of you. The hospital board has approved funding for similar programs in 3 other locations. Your love story has grown into something that will help countless others." Isabelle hugged the older woman, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "Thank you for believing in us, in all of this." "Speaking of belief," Dr. Winters smiled, "there's a very nervous baker downstairs who could probably use a message from his bride. He's made enough bread for a small army." Nate volunteered to be messenger. Taking a small note, Isabelle quickly wrote, "Some things, like perfectly braided bread and carefully tended love, are worth any amount of nervous practice. See you soon, my heart." Left alone to finish preparing, Isabelle opened her mother's old journal, the one she'd kept about their family garden. She'd pressed a forget-me-not between its pages the day her parents died, a reminder that love remained even when people couldn't. Now, she added a fresh one beside it, symbolizing how love could grow anew without diminishing what came before. The sounds of guests arriving drifted up through her window. Mrs. Bradford's distinctive voice carried as she proudly told anyone who would listen how she'd introduced the couple. The children from the hospital ward laughed as they arranged their handmade decorations. Through it all, she could hear Silas moving around his kitchen below, probably still stress baking. A final knock came just as she finished pinning the last flower in her hair. "Come in," she called, expecting Nate again. Instead, Lucy peeked around the door, resplendent in a new dress and wearing real hair instead of her usual scarf. "Surprise," she beamed. "The doctors said I could be here today, and look, my hair is growing back just like you said it would, just like the garden after winter." Isabelle hugged the young girl carefully, her heart full. "You look beautiful, sweetheart. Did you bring your special leaves for the aisle?" "Better." Lucy produced a small package. "I made this for you and Mr. Wizard. Nate helped me get it just right." Inside was a delicate artwork featuring pressed flowers and leaves arranged to show Moonlight Brew with its healing garden. In the piece, tiny figures could be seen. Silas at his bread counter, Isabelle among the herbs, Nate teaching art to children, and Lucy herself sitting in the butterfly garden. Along the border, more tiny figures watched from clouds made of flower petals, both sets of parents, eternally present in their garden of love. "It's for your new home," Lucy explained, "so you'll always remember how everything grew together perfect, like the best kind of garden." Tears threatened to ruin Isabelle's careful makeup as she hugged Lucy again. "It's the most beautiful gift we could receive." The garden bells chimed softly, their signal that it was time. Lucy hurried down to join the other children, leaving Isabelle alone for one final moment. She looked around the room that had become hers in this apartment that had become home. Her botanical books mixed with Silas's cookbooks on the shelves. Pressed flowers and leaves decorated every surface. The scent of fresh-baked bread and herbs drifted up from below. Through her window, she could see the garden where their love had grown. The memorial section blooming strong, the butterfly garden full of life, the herb beds that had started it all thriving under tender care. Their simple ceremony would take place among these living testaments to love's ability to bloom in unexpected places. The bells chimed again, and Isabelle gathered her bouquet of old and new flowers. In its center, she'd placed a single perfect leaf, Nate's maple leaf that had started their story. Around it bloomed fresh forget-me-nots, herbs from Silas's mother's garden, and flowers her own parents had loved. As she descended the stairs that had first led her to this life, Isabelle felt herself surrounded by love, the kind that remained after loss, the kind that grew from chance meetings, the kind that bloomed from patient tending. At the bottom, Nate waited to walk her down the aisle they'd created together. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm with gentle pride. Through the cafe windows, she caught a glimpse of Silas standing in their garden, tall and handsome in his dark suit, nervous hands finally still. Around him, their community gathered, hospital patients and staff, cafe regulars, Lucy and her young artists, Mrs. Bradford dabbing at her eyes already. In the gentle autumn light, the garden seemed to glow with possibility. "Ready?" Isabelle smiled, taking her brother's arm. "Let's go home." Behind them, morning sun streamed through windows lined with herbs, catching the edge of Silas's perfectly braided bread and Lucy's artwork propped on the counter. Outside, a butterfly danced through the garden, touching each flower like a blessing. And in between, in the space where past met future, love bloomed ever stronger, proving that the most beautiful gardens grow not from perfect plans, but from hearts brave enough to plant new dreams together. 1 year later, autumn painted Pine Valley in shades of gold and crimson as Silas stood in Moonlight Brew's kitchen, carefully arranging a special anniversary breakfast. His hands moved with practiced grace, creating heart-shaped pancakes for Nate, chamomile tea for Isabelle, and setting out the pastries they'd bake together later, a morning ritual that had become as natural as breathing. The cafe had evolved over the past year, much like their love, The once pristine space now featured pressed flowers alongside his perfectly arranged teacups, and Nate's leaf art decorated every wall. The garden had flourished beyond their wildest dreams, becoming a sanctuary that drew visitors from across the country, hoping to create similar healing spaces in their own communities. "Something smells amazing." Isabelle's voice came from behind him, as her arms slipped around his waist. She pressed a kiss between his shoulder blades, and Silas felt the now familiar warmth that her presence always brought. "Anniversary surprise?" He smiled, turning to face his wife. The morning light caught her forget-me-not necklaces, old and new together, making them sparkle like morning dew. "Though I suppose it's not much of a surprise anymore. The best kind of love isn't about surprises," she replied, reaching up to straighten his collar. "It's about the comfort of knowing exactly what makes someone's heart smile." The sound of eager footsteps announced Nate's arrival. At 19 now, he'd grown taller, more confident, but his infectious joy remained unchanged. "Happy anniversary," he exclaimed, carrying a large portfolio. "Wait until you see what the kids made for you." The portfolio contained artwork from every child in his now thriving art therapy program. Each piece incorporated pressed leaves and flowers, telling stories of healing and hope. Lucy, now cancer-free and his star student, had created a special centerpiece showing moonlight brew throughout the seasons. "It's beautiful," Isabelle breathed, touching the delicate artwork. "All of it." "That's not all," Nate grinned, practically bouncing with excitement. "Show them the letter, Bells." Isabelle pulled an official-looking envelope from her recipe book. "Dr. Winters called yesterday. The success of our program has attracted national attention. They want us to help establish healing gardens and art therapy programs in children's hospitals across the country." Silas sat down slowly, taking in the implications. "That would mean travel, teaching others, expanding beyond Pine Valley." "We don't have to decide right away," Isabelle assured him, understanding his hesitation about changing their carefully built life. "But imagine how many lives we could touch, how many gardens could bloom." "Like spreading seeds," Nate added thoughtfully. "The way flowers know how to grow wherever they're planted. Because love is love no matter where it blooms." Silas looked at his family, Isabelle with her gentle strength, Nate with his profound wisdom wrapped in innocent joy, and felt his heart expand. "When did you get so wise about growing things?" he asked, echoing words from their early days. "I had excellent teachers," Nate smiled, using Silas's own words back to him. "Several, actually." Their morning routine unfolded with comfortable familiarity. They shared breakfast as Nate showed them more artwork, explaining his plans for expanding the therapy program. Regular customers began arriving, many bringing anniversary wishes and small gifts, pressed flowers, special herbs, handmade cards. Lucy arrived with her parents, her dark hair now long enough for the flower clips she loved. "Look what I made," she announced, presenting them with a scrapbook. "It's your love story, told through leaves and flowers." Each page captured a moment of their journey. The first maple leaf Nate had shown Silas, herbs from their initial garden planning, flowers from their wedding. The final page held a surprise, an acceptance letter from the local art college where Lucy planned to study therapeutic art education. "You inspired me," she told Nate, hugging him tightly. "Now I want to inspire others." As morning turned to afternoon, they worked together in their expanded kitchen. Silas taught advanced bread-making classes now, while Isabelle offered workshops on therapeutic gardening. Today they prepared for a special anniversary celebration, not just of their wedding but of everything their love had grown into. The garden had doubled in size, expanding into neighboring lots with the community's support. The memorial section bloomed year-round, tended by families who found healing in nurturing growing things. The butterfly garden Nate designed had become a registered monarch way station, helping protect the endangered species while providing joy to visitors. "Remember when you used to arrange cups by color?" Isabelle teased as they prepared for the evening gathering. "Now look at us, dirt under our nails, flower in our hair, and somehow it's perfect." "Better than perfect," Silas replied, pulling her close. "It's real." The evening celebration brought together everyone their story had touched. Hospital patients past and present, art therapy students, gardening enthusiasts, and loyal cafe patrons filled the space with joy. Dr. Winters raised a toast to the power of unexpected love, while Mrs. Bradford dabbed at her eyes, still proud of her matchmaking success. As twilight painted the garden in soft purples and golds, Silas found himself standing in the exact spot where he'd first shown Isabelle his mother's journal. Now that journal sat in their library alongside Isabelle's botanical texts and Nate's art portfolios, their stories intertwined like well-tended vines. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Isabelle's voice drew him back to the present as she joined him, her hand finding his with practiced ease. "I was thinking about control," he admitted. "About how I used to need everything just so. Every cup aligned, every loaf perfectly timed. And now there are children's fingerprints on your windows and pressed leaves between your recipes. Now there's life." He smiled, echoing words from their early days. Real, messy, beautiful life. Nate joined them, followed by Lucy and several other young artists. They carried lanterns they'd made, decorated with pressed flowers and leaves that glowed like stained glass in the falling dark. "We have a surprise," Nate announced. Everyone helped. One by one, the lanterns were lit and placed along the garden paths, creating a constellation of earthbound stars. Each one bore artwork representing different aspects of their story: healing, growth, family, love. The effect was magical, turning their garden into an enchanted space where dreams and reality danced together. "This is what love looks like," Lucy declared with the absolute certainty of youth. "It's like your garden, always growing, always making room for new flowers while keeping the old ones safe in our hearts." As night settled over Pine Valley, their garden glowed with warmth and possibility. Patience and their families walked the illuminated paths, finding peace in the gentle beauty. Children from Nate's art classes proudly showed off their contributions to the Lantern Project. Community members shared stories of how this space had touched their lives. In a quiet moment, Silas held Isabelle close as they watched Nate teaching a group of children how to press flowers by lantern light. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For walking into my cafe asking for chamomile tea, for seeing beyond my careful walls, for bringing chaos and joy and infinite possibility into my measured life." Isabelle turned in his arms, her eyes reflecting the lantern light like stars. "Thank you for making space for our chaos, for loving Nate so completely, for showing me that taking care of others doesn't mean I can't be cared for too." Above them, stars emerged in the autumn sky as night deepened. The garden settled into peaceful quiet, lanterns glowing like earthbound constellations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to grow and share their healing space with others. But tonight, in this moment, everything was in perfect bloom. Love, they had learned, was like their garden, a living, breathing thing that required patience, tender care, and faith in tomorrow's flowers. It grew in unexpected places, survived strong storms, and bloomed most beautifully when different kinds of hearts learned to grow together. In Pine Valley, where a chance meeting over chamomile tea had started it all, their love story continued to flourish, not like a perfectly arranged collection of teacups, but like a well-tended garden where every flower, every leaf, every heart had room to grow in its own wild and wonderful way. 5 years had passed since that first autumn in Pine Valley, and Moonlight Brew's garden had grown into something beyond even their wildest dreams. The once small cafe now anchored a network of healing gardens across the country, each one sprouting from seeds of hope, planted in that first patch of earth behind Silas's kitchen. On this particular morning, Silas stood at his familiar counter, watching the sunrise paint the garden in shades of gold. His hands moved automatically through the motions of preparing the day's first batch of bread, but his attention was fixed on the scene outside his window. Isabelle knelt in their original herb garden, her hair now streaked with elegant strands of silver that caught the morning light. Beside her, their 4-year-old daughter Rose carefully planted chamomile seedlings, her small hands mimicking her mother's gentle movements. The child wore one of Nate's old aprons, modified yet again to fit her tiny frame, and spoke softly to each plant as she worked, a habit she'd inherited from both her parents. "Remember, sweetheart," Isabelle's voice drifted through the open window, "every flower has its own time to bloom." "Like Uncle Nate's special leaves?" Rose asked, her face serious with concentration. "Exactly like that." Speaking of Nate, now 24 and a respected art therapist, he was setting up for his morning class in the garden's teaching pavilion. His original art therapy program had blossomed into a full curriculum, taught in hospitals and healing centers across the country. Lucy, now in her final year of art school, worked as his assistant whenever she was home from college, helping to train the next generation of therapeutic artists. The garden itself had expanded far beyond its original boundaries. What started as a small healing space had grown to encompass several neighboring lots, becoming a sanctuary that drew visitors from around the world. The butterfly garden Nate designed had been recognized as a model for therapeutic spaces, and his pressed leaf art technique was being taught in children's hospitals everywhere. Dr. Winters had retired last year, but still visited regularly to sit in her favorite spot in the memorial garden, where generations of healing stories were now pressed between the pages of time. Mrs. Bradford, though moving more slowly these days, remained the garden's proudest champion, still telling anyone who would listen about the day she'd brought together a precise baker and a botanical artist. The sound of small feet on hardwood pulled Silas from his reverie. Rose had come in for her morning ritual, helping him arrange the teacups while telling him stories about the garden's newest blooms. Like her mother, she saw magic in growing things. Like him, she found joy in careful arrangements and precise measurements. Like Nate, she discovered wonder in every fallen leaf. "Daddy," she said, standing on her tiptoe stool to reach the counter, "did you know that chamomile flowers dance just like Uncle Nate's butterflies?" "Is that so?" Silas smiled, remembering another morning long ago when Isabelle had first noticed the dancing flowers in her teacup. And Mama says that's how love grows, like flowers dancing in the morning light. The bell above the door chimed softly as Isabelle entered, carrying fresh herbs for the day's baking. Her forget-me-not necklaces, both the one from her parents and the one from their wedding day, caught the light like memories made tangible. She smiled at the sight of them, her botanist's hands automatically reaching to straighten Rose's already perfect apron. "What wisdom is our gardener sharing this morning?" she asked, pressing a kiss to Silas's flower-dusted cheek. "The secret of dancing flowers," he replied, pulling her close with one arm while keeping the other around Rose. "And growing love." Through the window, they could see Nate welcoming his first students of the day. Lucy had arrived and was helping him set up the art supplies, their easy companionship hinting at a story beginning to bloom in its own right. The morning sun filtered through the garden's leaves, casting patterns like pressed flowers across the cafe floor. In the years since that first autumn day, they had learned that love grew best when given room to flourish in unexpected ways. Their carefully tended garden had become not just a place of healing, but a testament to how beauty could spring from loss, how joy could root in sorrow's soil, how the most precious blooms often grew from seeds planted by gentle hands and hopeful hearts. Rose wiggled free from their embrace, eager to arrange the day's teacups in her own special pattern. Silas and Isabelle watched their daughter work, her small hands moving with inherited precision as she created a rainbow of ceramics that told its own kind of story. "Some things never change," Isabelle whispered, leaning into her husband's embrace. "And some things change in the most beautiful ways," Silas replied, thinking of perfectly arranged teacups and chaotically perfect love. Outside, the garden continued its eternal dance of growth and renewal. Inside, in a cafe that had become the heart of countless healing stories, a family tended to their own carefully planted dreams. And everywhere, in every bloom and leaf and gentle touch, love continued to grow in its own wild and wonderful way. For in Pine Valley, where chamomile flowers still danced in morning teacups and pressed leaves held stories of hope between their pages, the most beautiful gardens were those planted with love, tended with patience, and allowed to bloom in their own perfect time. The end. Based on this touching story of transformation, growth, and healing through love, I have a profound question for us to reflect on together. If you could plant a healing garden in your life today, what would be the first seeds you would choose? Think of the Silas who need more color in their routine, the Nates who see magic where others don't, and the Isabelles who nurture the growth of others. What kind of flowers would you plant to bring more light into your life and the people around you? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. Your feedback is very important to our work. Please leave a comment telling us what you think and where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. Your participation is very important for the continuation of our work, so share it with those who will love this story.